Good evening, everyone. It is my honor and privilege to welcome everyone, especially the panelists, to this August gathering where, the prayer really is that the divine blesses us with the necessary clarity. The brilliance of the panel members is such that they need no introduction. We have Jinanji with us, Raghuji with us, Raghavji and Vinayji. Thank you so much for joining us here. This is lovely. And I won't go into too much of introduction because we really have a very short window today to go into depths. So what I'll do is I'll first set a context, of the overall umbrella under which today's session is and discussion is situated. Jananji will follow this up with this or with setting the context specific to this particular webinar, which concerns itself with the colonization of cognition. And that's one of the concerns under this umbrella that we're talking about, around for which the Purvaranga is being performed, right? And I think while the colonization of cognition is a sizable concern, and it might seem like we could wrap everything under it, there are other concerns that definitely deserve their own attention, and I will be indicating and talking about that in a bit. So before we get started, I thought we'll start with a little invocation. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishate. So the Indic Knowledge Systems, being the sort of the knowledge systems derived and assembled from regions far beyond the polity of India, and that's why I choose to call it Indic rather than the Indian Knowledge Systems, has seen as sort of being enjoying a spotlight of sorts in the past couple of years. Those who were in the depths and in the works of it were always involved. It's, I think, in a way, the placement in the NEP has garnered a lot of attention, as well as political patronage that is currently being accorded to the ways of this land. The response from the educational community is quite understandable, right? So we have educators typically responding in one of three ways. Either there's an enthusiastic subscription saying that, oh, yes, let's do it. This is what we wanted. This is what we've looked at. Or there are the frustrated suspension. It's like, okay, we'll just wait for that final circular to come. When that comes, then I will move a finger. And there are also reactionary resistance. Folks who say, oh, Indic Knowledge System, it must be this, it must be that, without completely comprehending what it is. They just would like to resist and say, we don't want it. We don't want it included. We are this, we are that, we are liberal, we are secular, so on and so forth. Now, none of these three responses really are necessarily ideal response, because without understanding what the IKS entails, engaging with it is quite likely to cause problems. And we'll visit these challenges that such behaviors pose. And I think that is important to understand. And that's sort of the context we're setting. Now, there are a variety of ways of looking at what IKS-based education is. So I have this particular Ashta Lakshana chart where there are various tenets, various characteristics unique to it that come out. But the very fact that you have these ways of describing IKS, and there are a lot of inherent expectations before we can even embark on it, they create a lot of challenges. So some of the challenges I will see is created by publishers, where in textbooks you largely see notations like, oh, so-and-so found this, so-and-so discovered this, so-and-so invented this. Or they'd mention a tome or two or a treatise here and there, but never go into it in depth. So it's largely nostalgic, it's a little cosmetic. People say, oh, can you just come and do an IKS workshop? And once you're done, can you give us some lesson plans? And we're like, wait, you know whether your teachers will understand or, understand or be prepared to do it. Giving them a lesson plan doesn't make sense. And this is not something you lesson plan out, right? So there's a lot of that. And another problem, part of which will be touched upon today, is that it could be excessively academic or textual in its treatment, right? There are also communal treatment, saying that, oh, no, we have to get together and do this, and we are the ones who are the upholders and all of that stuff, which is uh, quite unlike what the IKS spirit is, because it's very inclusive in its nature, in its intended qualities. Uh, and sometimes it's just message passing. I, as a teacher, will learn to say that these 10 sentences, and I will say these 10 sentences to the students, and I'm expecting that the IKS transaction has been completed. Which is why some schools will say, oh, we'll set aside one period or one session per week. That should do, right? That will be enough for IKS. And we're like, what about? Because if you have 35 sessions in a week, one session is IKS, the student is still going to be under the influence of the 34 other sessions, right? So with that, so these are the sort of the problems that are there that schools and other consumers of the IKS are surfacing. But inherent to the aspiration of engaging with and absorbing the Indic knowledge systems, there are many. And today's discussion is essentially going to be on one of them, which is the colonization of cognition. But there are many others, and I'll just quickly list them without going into depth just for a short time. There's also a despirited spiritual element. People admit that the core of the IKS is the spirituality, but are not really sure how to go about it. We sort of think that, maybe just meditation, or maybe we'll once in a while go to some temple or religious space or some it's very vague and unclear. The notion of a heritage, why do I inherit it? Why should I maintain it? What happens if I don't maintain it? What is the role of a heritage, tradition, culture? That itself is not clearly understood. And without that, the value and substance of an IKS could be lost. Then we have societal silos. IKS was situated in a society that worked in tandem with IKS. Now, today we have a society that is disjoint from that. Right? So there are also societal issues that will come into the consideration of how IKS can be absorbed. Then, of course, there's a dharmic disorientation. The notion of dharma itself is misconstrued and has caused a lot of debate. Without understanding that, getting into an IKS, where dharma and dharmic considerations are the backbone, even if not explicitly treated, they are the backbone. To not have that can cause problems. This notion of a civilizational thing, right? It's very easy to say, hey, we think civilization, but that's not as simple. It involves saying no to things which are very convenient. It involves saying no to a lot of things, taking on a particular stance. There's a lot of things that we have to look into. Next is the language itself, right? A lot of the Indic knowledge system in the form of text or anything has been in Sanskrit or in some of the original chaste languages. Now, without understanding that and the power of the sound and the shabda, to just go on with translations is also missing the approach of the IKS. And then there's this partisan. There's a lot of people think, oh, no, it is for those people. It is not for us. It is not truly secular. Have all of these problems. These are not problems of IKS itself. These are problems of IKS adoption, right? And then there is the ruptured parampara. There is no parampara anymore that is there. It has been, fragmented, is fractured. There's a lot of those concerns as well that come up. And then we have these things. Oh, how do we do assessment? So we have these scores give out. How do you give out a board exam grade for an IKS? All of these other concerns, and just generally measuring. How do I measure that this person is IKSer than that person, or whatever the right words would be? So all of those are concerns. There are a lot more to it, and I think we'll surface them as we go along. But what we thought is that we'll pick each one of these, iron it out, make it consumable, understandable for schools, and then take it forward. And with that, we're starting with today's discussion, which is the colonization of cognition. The idea, the thought process around these series of webinars is that we'll have one like these, big ones on a periodic basis. And between any two big ones, we'll probably have a couple of sessions with school educators, school leaders, so that we can unpack whatever might seem like very esoteric language in a more actionable form for them. This is the. I will soon hand it over to Jinanji. I get to play the role of asking questions and representing people who feel that these are too silly questions to ask. So I will take it on myself and ask all the silly questions that can be thought of. And I would love to hear from the panelists and how is it that we should navigate this thing, right? So we're going to take baby steps. We can't not take steps forward, because now that we have seen, each one of us has experienced in our own different ways the beauty of the Indic knowledge system, there's no going back. It's very difficult to unsee or know once beauty has been beheld. And I think that's really what is driving each one of us to ensure that it is consumed and engaged with in the right spirit. With that, I'll pass this on to Jinanji. You could unmute yourself, and you could also share. You have the rights to share. So
yeah. Thank you. So first, let me take you through an experience before I start my presentation. I mean, I will say in between few things. So, please participate. You can unmute yourself. That may be better. So, because I am actually wanting to take you through an experience. So I'll show you things, and, it'll be good if you can just answer the questions, All right. So, because, then we will, I'll give 5 minutes of my journey, but I think it'll be good to go through this. So I want to ask a few questions. What is the color of sky? First, no, you've now grown very old. Okay. What is the color of sky once again? All right. Nobody has anything to say. Color of leaf, at least this.
Green.
All right.
Different in different plants and different seasons.
Too shy to speak. No, don't worry. All right. Okay. So I expected this. Okay. Now take a look at this picture. Right. Good look at this picture. Right. Take a look at this. Got it? Side. Right. Okay. So I want to check with you. Where did your eye go and rested?
These two pictures. Sure you're sharing. Am I the only one, or is
no? We could see.
We can see it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I just went to the note that was there.
Correct, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, no, sir. Where did your eye go first? This is what I wanted to ask. How long it stayed? Did you even get to see what else was there? That's another question. Okay. Now take a look at this. See the way the eye functions. All right. Now see what happens. All right. Okay. Now, so from perceiving the whole to linear focus perception. All right. I'll take you through some more. Now, please answer this. I want, please tell. It will be interesting. Name the color.
Blue.
Continue.
Red.
Continue. Keep naming. Yeah. Keep naming.
Black.
I
Black,
want to take you
orange,
white.
White.
Now, okay. Now continue to tell the color. Tell color fast.
Green.
Name of the color.
White.
Yellow.
Blue.
Black.
Come on.
Red.
All right. Okay. So this is what I call as cognitive dissonance. The body is not able to participate. The mind is taking over. So the mind is engaging with the text, body imbibes the experience choicelessly. I'm distinguishing between how senses function and how mind has taken over the senses. Right? Dominating the body. Let me take you through a little bit more to more experience. Yeah, imagine you're traveling from Delhi to Bangalore. Okay? Take a trip. You done that? Now take a trip back from Bangalore to Delhi. All right? Please open your Shanti. Please open your this thing. At least let me see your face. It is 3-4 of you can offer, show me your face. That will be very good. Yeah, thank you. Now, tell me, when you imagine traveling from Delhi to Bangalore and from Bangalore to Delhi, did you take a vertical journey? You went up
Yeah.
and came down, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So actually what happens is that the literates are operating in two-dimensional realm. You can see each of this, I'm telling you what is happening to the literate mind. Don't resist now and don't argue also. Don't resist. Just listen. You don't have to agree with me, but don't deny your experience. That's why I'm making you experience what I'm talking about. Take a look at this, all right? Now this. Now this. All right? Got an experience? Now this. Okay? Right? All right. You see? Two kinds of experiences. When you see this, the object is in the mind. Immediately, you saw it, it's there, right? This is called learning the world. And this is a physiological response of the senses. Now take a look at this. Right? The letter comes in, and then there is a vague recollection of an object. Quite often vague. It probably doesn't even come. It's only the jug is there. They call learning the word. That's a mental response because the senses can't function here. How the mind numbs and subdues the functioning of the senses. That's what I'm trying to talk about. All right. And literacy actually creates perpetual absence in the literates because they're always dealing with what is absent. The problem with modern educated is that they're perpetually absent because they're always dealt with absence. That is why you have to go to Sadhguru or somebody like that to regain your meditation, right? So what I say is that literates learn the word, illiterates learn the world. Please keep this in mind, right? So what should be cognition then? What is cognition? Let me ask you 2-3 more questions. Who taught you cycling? Can you tell me?
I learned
No.
by myself.
All right. Okay. And on swimming?
I was helped by an adult.
All right. So I was chapati making. Let me tell this also. Who taught you how to make chapati?
I
My
learned
friend.
from observation.
All right. Now let's take a look at this. What I'm telling is that cycling can only be taught by cycle, swimming can only be taught by water, and chapati making can only be taught by atta. All the bystanders have actually no role in knowledge creation, not learning. All right. See, this is all a false idea modern education has promoted, that by reading some nonsense, you have knowledge. Absolute nonsense. So literates are shaped by the word. Now look at this. This is the cognitive science I'm talking about, which modern cognitive science is not understood. Literates are shaped by the word because right from childhood, you're engaging with the word. Right? It is not poor Descartes who created the problem of mind and body fragmentation. It is the experience of word right from childhood that fragments the body and mind. Because you are only dealing with the mind. The senses have no role. So I have been actually involved in 2 areas of research. You see, in 1991, I quit reading completely, 100% no reading. Right? And I was living with illiterate people. I found that there is no gyan being bought over there. Nobody is distributing knowledge. That by the age of 12, 13, the artisans were learning all kinds of skills, whether it is pottery, bamboo, or farming, all skills, even classical music. I found that. So the area of my research has been what I call as biological roots of cognition. And at that time, I had no idea about what was happening because in 91, I had stopped reading completely. I had no idea that there is a research that is happening around this, So it was a very personal confrontation of what was happening in the name of education in this country. That I did engineering, I found that I only heard of Charles Ross and Boyle's law. So without having any patriotic fervor, I began to ask, why is that nobody created knowledge from this country? I mean, I'm not talking about only this country, because modern education means colonization of rest of the West. That's it. That everyone who has been educated is operating in the Western paradigm, the Western format. That's our sensibilities. So that's why I quit reading completely, because I felt it is absolutely pointless to reading all kinds of books that that doesn't actually deal with cognition. And in biological roots of cognition, my special interest was to observe children and understand how to create knowledge, because knowledge creation is something that modern educationists have never ever questioned. They have questioned it only within the paradigm of how to teach children, not about how children learn. That has never been the focus of attention. Only now, with the AI coming in, they have been defeated by their LLMs. So now there is one group who wants to know how world is learned. They know that LLMs are not going to solve the problem. So there is one group now wanting to understand how the world is being learned. And the other area that I began to research is what I call as the cognitive damages of literacy. How a person from childhood who become literate completely gets disconnected from the world and create the story within their head and become very mental totally. Right? So modern education is about three aspects. Modern education is about political power, imposition of Western paradigm. Second is knowledge for merchandise, because the whole modern education is about, first, not only the education has become market driven, but the interesting aspect is that all the research that is being done is to promote market. Any research on senses is not for understanding how senses function. For example, take cognition. Why are we studying cognition? For bettering artificial intelligence, not for bettering schools. That is never the intention of cognitive scientists. And the other thing is that it is only producing cognitive labor. That's it. So authenticity is denied, rootedness is denied, what is to be human is denied. We just become slaves of the modern industrial complex. This is all what is happening. So educated Indians are damaged in two aspects. One is that, of course, they are culturally completely damaged, because the whole idea of culture is very bookish. They don't even know what culture is. And of course, then biological damage because of literacy, right from childhood, under literacy. So, of course, the West also doesn't have any means of escape, because they're very arrogant. They think that they know everything. So even though, and of course, that itself is the cultural damage for them. So I won't take more time. I just want to tell you that if you really want to understand things, all these words will have to be redefined. There is no way you can understand any of this if you want to truly understand what is biology of cognition. But that's how do we cognize the world? I'm not talking about reading nonsense, no? How do we actually understand? So if you actually take many of these questions that are completely misunderstood, learning means somebody will teach you and then you will learn. My redefinition is that to learn means to create knowledge. That is the only thing that we are doing. See, all living beings are cognitive beings. All living beings are choicelessly creating knowledge. Without knowledge, there is no existence. Existence is about knowledge. There's nothing else. And we just don't create knowledge. Educated. So whether you look at imagination, intelligence, originality, all these questions need to be, without addressing this, there is no way we can, and especially understanding children, because whatever, we, read all kinds of books, that's not going to help. We have to understand the roots of cognition, because because it begins with childhood. So I won't take more time. I just want to, create all full trouble and then leave here. That's it. My intention was only to disturb the hell out of you. That's all. Thank you for patient attendance.
Mission accomplished. Thank you so much. This is very good. I'll sort of just circulate through the panelists. Raghuji, what would you like to say about this?
You want me to speak now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to do something I usually don't do, Anand. I dislike PowerPoint slides, but since you're given me only 3 minutes and I have to present something very huge,
Okay.
I'm going to do the stupid thing of using a PowerPoint slide.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So I shall do some prashchitta afterwards for this. Yeah. So let me just give you a quick background. Yeah. One of the problems with what Jinan shared, Jinan, I'm going to take up an issue with you right away. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is the moment you use English words, you get into this word problem. If you use a Sanskrit word, you may not get into the same word problem, because English words are nouns and Sanskrit words are verbs. Okay, so the word Vidya itself cannot be translated as knowledge. Vidya has two parts. Vidya, to know, ya, to apply. It has a momentum to it. So Vidya is not translatable as knowledge. Okay. So what is it then we have to look at? And to understand it, we have to very quickly understand the basis of Indian ontology. How do you look at the world? All the problems Jinan talked about is because you're looking at the world as a flat earth. Okay. You're not looking at the world the way Indic Shastra asks you to look at the world, and even the farmer looks at the world like this. Huh? I've talked to many of them. Okay, there is Purusha. I'll just take you very quickly through this. And then there is Prakriti, and Prakriti consists of 4 different levels, all of which exist simultaneously even right now. So the first level is called Mula Prakriti or Alinga. Alinga simply means that which has no indicators. Then the next level is called Linga, or something that has indicators. I can become aware of it, and this is seamless. Everything in the universe is part of this. And then I have Avishesha, which is the cloud-like reality that people share. Like, for example, all human beings are one cloud. All plants are another cloud. But in Linga, they're all the same. And then you get into the Vishesha world, which is a separate, distinct world, which is what we exist and which is what English words name. Okay, so you have the 5 bhutas, then you have the 5 jnanendriyas and karmendriyas, and you have the manas. Okay, this is very, very important, because all Indic knowledge takes this framework for granted and then goes into defining what knowledge is. So if you have to understand IKS, you must understand this particular pattern, or the first 3 levels. Avidya, Dharma Vidya and Dhyana Vidya are together called Apara-Vidya, that which is not transcended. Only Atma Vidya is called Para-Vidya. Now this is a very, very critical contribution of Indic knowledge systems to understanding knowledge. So what is today generally called knowledge would be called Kala in our system. Kala means you have to work with your hands to understand that Kala. What is Kala meant for? Kala is meant for the first level. Avidya does not mean ignorance. That's a stupid English translation. Avidya simply means that which is not transcendent. Avidya is important for livelihoods, and that's all we are teaching people through our current systems to become part of what Jinan calls the industrial system and so on. Yeah? And this is simply, if you use the Ayurvedic framework, it is the Shamanam level. I have a problem, I have to solve the problem, I learned something to solve the problem. Yeah? Now, below that, unless you help the person understand the deep interconnectedness between history and geography and science and technology and politics. You're teaching them nothing. So when you start understanding deep interconnectedness of all of the phenomenon in the world, you get to Dharma Vidya, and then you understand that a human being cannot say, I'm the boss of the world and I can do whatever I want with it. Then you go into Dhyana Vidya or Prajna, where you get into meditative states and you observe the world and yourself from that meditative state. Right? And then you might transcend into what is called Atma Vidya. Now, without understanding this, what is happening, which is why the problem that Anand was talking about, you don't take mathematics and say India also had mathematics. Because there was some Muni who talked about the principles of math. The principles of math is used in your column, it's used in music, it's used in art, it's used in technology, it's used in science, it's used in commerce, it's used in everything. So you learn the kala, and through that you learn the underlying principles as far as you want to go, as deep as you want to go. This has always been the way of Indic Knowledge Systems. If you follow that, there is no question of 35 hours or 40 hours. I can teach geography, I can teach anything from a completely different perspective. If this perspective doesn't change, through what we are doing in what is called IKS today, we are actually colonizing people into categorizing Indic knowledge in systems which cannot contain this. Okay? So that's my 2-bit worth.
Thank you. Raghavaji.
I think Raghu summed it up for all of us. And Jinanji, thank you so much for the provocation. I'll quickly allude to how I see this, picking up from the examples that Raghuji has given about word and language and cognition. The Paytm, I've given this example before in other conversations. If you look at the Paytm message that you get when you make a transaction, there are now 2 responses. One is in English and one is in Hindi or your mother tongue also. In English, the transaction reads as you received a payment of 50 rupees. If you observe what it is in Hindi or any of the Indian languages, it would say 50 rupaye prapt hue. Now, prapt includes an entire worldview. Praptam is not a give and take transaction. Praptam is a karmic, ontological statement. Right? So I completely agree that the root of this reclamation would go through Indian languages, particularly Sanskrit, but any of the Indian languages that draw from it. But I'd also like to locate the fracture itself, and I think Jinanji alluded to that. But the industrial modern education system itself draws from a historical location and the Western psyche and what happened. Because the minute we talk about colonization, there's a danger that it conjures an image of the other. And that while that is true, there is also a lot of benefit in understanding the psyche based on the historical experience they had. Now, that's a culture and a civilization that had a lot of struggle between reason and faith, between God and the scientist, between what is lived and what is taught. And for them, the fact that when Enlightenment or Reformation happened, they've traded gods. They traded the religious God for the scientific God. Now, it's a civilization in modern history since Enlightenment, which has been beaten by both the God and by science. And therefore, there's a lot of trauma. This is not an Indian recognition. This is a recognition. The most poignant material on this comes to us from the West. One of the good thinkers who I follow on this is a guy called Enriquez, and he's trying to locate all of this in what he calls the unified theory of knowledge. So this is not an Indian pursuit alone. This is a pursuit that animates a lot of conscientious thinkers across the world. And I found his conception useful, which I think is relevant for our conversation. I'll end there. He says that we have 3 ways of knowing. The first way of knowing is the first person subjective. In fact, this should be obvious to us, which is what Raghuji's illustration showed us. All of our life's greatest moments. Take anything that makes you human. Love, anxiety, death, fear. All of these things are primarily experiences, which is what Jinanji is alluding to. Are you in touch with your experiences? Whether they're coming in through senses or other modes, are you really in touch? Do you have a means to cogitate on that? The second way is intersubjective. Now, we are all part of this seminar today, and we construct this experience of what this means to us through this exchange. There's a storytelling mode, right? And together we form some experience of this, and the truth of this experience comes to us. And the third way of knowing is the object-subject separation, which is the whole Descartes and the Enlightenment mode. Now, the Western education system, which we have unfortunately inherited and institutionalized more effectively than the West themselves, is a trade-off, is actually only looking at the third way of knowing, the object-separate, subject-separate way of knowing, and discarding the first two ways, the first-person subjective, which Sri Aurobindo very famously called as first-person constant intuitive perception. And I think there's a lot to unpack there when we get a chance. And the second way, which was the civilizational way, the civilization did not end with Upanishads. It did not just leave you with a Mahavakya. It gave you the Purana. It gave you the Itihasa. It gave you storytelling. So if you look at the Indian knowledge system way of knowing, the principle was established. Then the storytelling, the Prabhu Samhita or the Raja Samhita of the Shastra was then taken to the society through the Mitra Samhita of the Itihasa and Purana. And for the stubborn few who refuse to learn, even when a friend teaches you, we also had the Kanta Samhita, which is where the Kala and the art and all of those performative traditions also come, where learning is embodied, but learning is also relayed as a lover would talk to you. Right? So I think when we talk about reclamation of IKS, we are looking at expanding the range through which human beings learn. And we don't need to have this trade-off or the historical burden that the West had imposed on itself and on others. So that's where I look at this.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Vinay.
Yeah, namaste. Please pardon my voice. Just learned to speak again today after 5 days. So usually there's nothing much left to say after all these three people have spoken. But I was reading Jinanji's original article, and I wanted to just address that, and I've tried to address it elsewhere as well. I think fundamentally what we are talking about is there is a conceptual reality that we all experience, whoever it may be in the world. You're experiencing the world through concepts. But there is a phenomenal reality underlying all concepts. How do we access that? That's the whole point of what we're talking about here. The West got stuck with the conceptual reality. They got stuck with imposing the map on the terrain. And our rishis actually access phenomenal reality, but they also said, you don't have to believe me, I'll give you the method, and you can access it yourself also. That is the whole thing. And from that came so many attempts to give us, and I've experienced with my own guru, they're so magnanimous. They're never happy with giving a little. They want to share everything they know and they've experienced. And once you have actually experienced even a glimpse of phenomenal reality, there is a immense desire in you to share it with, even an ant, when it finds a little bit of honey, wants to call all its relatives, right? Even a bird, when it finds some food, wants to call all its relatives. So for human being, the greatest thing is able to taste this nectar of phenomenal reality. And if you experience that even a little bit, you'll be, wanting to go and share this with a lot of people. And with that motivation, so many of our, acharyas and so on created so many of these darshanas and so on. So when engaging with these texts, you have to set the context of, why they were created, how they were created, what is the context, purpose, how to engage with them, and so on, instead of straight away jumping into the pool, right? Not knowing what lies beneath. And that context setting is not happening today because you're looking at, because unknowingly and with the concerted effort of the West, we have inherited those mental models which we take for granted as the truth. Every child will say, you read book and you acquire knowledge, and that is never contested, right? Why do you go to school? I asked this in one of the colleges I was asked to speak. These are undergrad students. I asked them, why are you coming to this college? Nobody could answer, right? It was shocking to the principal. So what has happened is this education system has created robots that function mechanically. And what Jinanji is talking about is how do we awaken the original humanity in them, where they begin to see the world that the divine has actually created again. And that is the reclaiming of the cognition. And I think it is possible. And I have experienced it. And there are ways to do it. And if we get a chance, I'd like to talk about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fantastic. And I think, yes, we should connect back. Jinji, I think your points that you're talking about, I had a couple of responses, right? Like, for instance, when you talk about the text, you said that here is a cup, and I show you the picture of a cup, my senses are engaged. But when you write the word cup on the screen, I'm just reading it. It's very interesting. It's not a very ancient person also. He just died recently. Stephen King, when he was talking about writing, he said writing is predominantly telepathy. The difference that we would experience when you showed me a cup versus writing a cup is when I say the word cup, there are 100 different cups imagined right here on the screen with all the people. Whereas once you've shown me the cup, it's done. It's decided. There is no more of an exercising of one's imaginative faculty that is required, right? So I think each modality has its
I think this is a complete misunderstanding, actually.
Okay.
You're interpreting it very differently. You see, the problem, I want to make it very clear that from 1991, I stopped reading completely and I started documenting what children do.
Okay.
Right? So it has been, if you don't mind, I would call my activity as tapas. I was doing tapas from 1991 onward, consistently observing what children do. All right. So I think if you attend slightly longer, then you will say, I've very clearly studied how the senses function, what is imagination, what is abstraction. Step by step, I have studied. The problem is that what is imagination is not understood, because modernity begins from imaginary imagination, because they read books and create an image in their head. From that, they imagine more. You see, first, what I want to tell you, there's something called cognitive foundation. Cognitive foundation has to be of the senses. Now, there is a misunderstanding that many people have that pratyaksha, anubhana, all these are different ways of knowing. No, this is an absolute nonsense. You have to have first pratyaksha first, based on which anumana will come, based on which something else will come. So there is a clear hierarchy in that.
Yes.
So we have to understand this very clearly, that we have to first root ourselves through the senses to the earth, to where we belong.
Yes.
Only then, so imagination should happen based on what you've seen. It is not imagination of imagination. And the other problem that I've understood is that hardly anybody has done a proper study on how cognition develops in a child. So you're assuming that. Because the problem is that when you read Patanjali or I have not read most of it. I'm just telling that I keep hearing this Anumana and all that kind of stuff. No, I'm just telling that only. But I find that there is a complete misunderstanding, because we assume that imagination. Just know what you told, na? That so many people imagine so many things, na? Yes. Now, the problem of modernity is precisely that, because we don't have a common thing about which we are talking about. Everybody has their own imagination of everything. The modern crisis is that we are not rooted. We don't know what we are talking about. We are talking about things, but there is no commonality. There's no contextual commonality. And sorry, I just intervene to say that this imagination needs to, that's why I told them that all these words that I mentioned needs to be revisited. Every word that modernity has given you needs to be revisited. Other thing that I want to tell Raghu is that I always use knowing. I don't use knowledge. Knowledge is a modern concept. I always see, I have studied two types of languages. One is experiential language, other is mental language. Modernity uses mental language. Tradition, indigenous communities uses experiential language, where that is verb centric, whereas modernity is noun centric. So the issue is this, that when you read Sanskrit, but if your mind is occupied, that's a mental language. How does one thing become experiential language, and how does one thing become mental language is what we need to understand. Right? Just because you're reading Sanskrit, that doesn't make you into a verb centric person. Unless you have rootedness in the context.
One thing, I agree, but I think there is an assumption that is being made, which, as we had also discussed in the article, that in the ancient times, it was only knowing and there was no knowledge as an artifact. There was knowledge as an artifact. There was always that existed. The difference, and what I think has been lost over the centuries, is one has gained currency over the other. That did not exist in the earlier days. See, there was knowing, there was an artifact of knowledge, and that was also passed forward, and that had its legitimacy. But knowing was never allowed to, be bypassed. The knowing was very important.
What was the knowledge
Anand,
that
can I come
about?
in here? Can I come
please.
in here for a minute?
Please.
Yeah. See, first thing is, you don't read Sanskrit. You learn using Sanskrit through a parampara. There are no scriptures in India. There is only parampara and shruti. Okay. The second thing is, there is something called mediation in the process of learning, which I think is very important, which is what my teacher did for me, and I'm sure anybody who studied in a parampara understands what mediation is all about. Okay, so all the Upanishads, particularly the Bhrigu story, is very explicit. Bhrigu comes and asks the teacher, what is Brahma? The teacher says, this is what the elders have said, that is Agama. Then he says, you will not understand it because you've heard me saying it. Go and meditate. Satapo, tapyata, whatever, all of that. After he meditates, he's not just sent off into the, go and meditate. He's taught methods. Through the method, he goes through Anumana. Every time he has a pratyaksha, he comes back to his teacher and says, this is my pratyaksha, is it accurate? So the teacher says it is accurate. If the student does not have a question, the learning ends there. Bhrigu asks the same question again. I've learnt all this. This is not complete. What is Brahman? It's exactly the same words. And the teacher says exactly the same thing again. He goes back, learns new methods, meditates, whatever you want to use. He does tapas actually, dhyana, whatever. And finally, until he comes to a clear, direct Atma Pratyaksha, Aparoksha Jnanam. He doesn't say, I've got it. He comes back with questions and doubts. Yeah, and there are two things we are confusing here, Jinan. One is denotative language and connotative language. So in yoga, we use Mano Gochara and Buddhi Gochara. This has always been there in our tradition. Mano Gochara, I have to show you. If you have to sculpt something, unless I show you how to sculpt and then you start sculpting it, you cannot understand. Mano Gochara includes senses. Buddhi Gochara is the mathematics behind that sculpture. So our tradition says you need both, and you don't say one is more important than the other, and you don't trust words, because words create vikalpa. Vikalpa is very, very different from imagination. Okay, the Western word imagination does not comprehend what the word vikalpa means. Okay, and you need vikalpa for vijnana. Yeah, so that's the way the whole knowledge system in India goes, and the importance is not given to the taught, it is given to the teacher. So the entire process of training, if you want to really do IKS, the teacher has to go through these. The teacher has to be in Dhyana Vidya. The teacher has to be in deeper states. Then it doesn't matter if you're teaching geography or history or teaching Descartes or whoever.
Or the modality that is employed.
You will bring something else into the process where you respond to where the child is and not some idea of what has to be taught. So if you really have to get into IKS, the teacher is much, much more important than the content.
I feel like
Today the problem is we're focusing on the content.
Wait, I think.
Sorry, Vinayji had something to add to this as well. Vinayji.
Actually, at that point, I was thinking something, but yeah, I think what Jinanji is trying to say is, how do we get back to, I think agreeing with what Raghuji is talking about, but now we're talking about reclaiming, or your title was, can we inherit what we were taught to disinherit?
Yes.
So what is the process of walking back?
Yes, that's
today?
what we need to work towards. And I think that process, I think, if I may, what Jinanji is saying, I think, Jinanji, none of us are disagreeing with the value and the primacy of Pratyaksha, right? So that is the foundation. And thereafter, any of the other pramanas can be used. As in, if I may just take 1 minute, right? The difference between what is happening today, where the prama is more important. In the past, there were 4 parts. There was the pramata, the prameya, the object that there's the knower, the object that is to be known, the pramana, which was the mechanism, and then the prama was created at the end. Today, all of our, right from our assessments to everything, is only focused on the prama. It's like, I don't care who you are, I don't care about what you've been through or how you've learned. Tell me whether the answer that I'm expecting is coming out. This has destroyed our understanding of the connection between these 4 elements. This has to be resurrected. This has to be reestablished in its completeness. There is no doubt about that. And in that, Pratyaksha has its utter vitality, no doubt about it. That said, should we throw the textual resources out? Or is it an act of throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Is, I think, what we're getting to say. Yes, Binay, go for it.
Yeah, so actually what you're talking about is, now people are saying, showing those studies on what happens to the mind that is on ChatGPT and all that.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say, maybe controversial, is that ChatGPT has been ruining our minds ever since Western education came. It's already been there because it was obsessed with answers, and it gives answers before the question has even arisen, the question before that question arose,
Yes.
in the person's mind. So our process was how to, ask the right questions, not even just ask a question, which is the right question that's worth our time to investigate and pursue. Even that is not being done.
Yes.
Right. So we
Yes.
have to.
So all of those have to be brought back, which is, sorry, there is a question on the chat. I think it's for you, Raghu. This is coming from Shankar Narayan. I'm just going to read it out as it is. Doesn't awareness exist even before/without cognition? Then shouldn't awareness be the starting point?
Yeah.
If awareness is the realm of Atma Vidya, is there a sequence in the 4 types of Vidya that Raghuji shared?
See, short questions are very scary because they have long answers. Let me very quickly try and tell you something, Shankar Narayan. See, one of the big issues which the Indic knowledge system and Sampradaya system tries to work with is, can I help you recognize things and not tell you things? Now, one of the biggest problems, the reason why I use the Ayurvedic example is, all our problems at one level is because I experience something internally in my buddhi level. I'm told something else by my parents, very well-meaning. I feel anger and I'm told you should not be angry. I feel sadness, I want to cry, and then you're told, no, you're a boy, you shouldn't cry. So there is a constant knotting up of my pranic movement without understanding, and that's the beauty of the Bhrigu story. Bhrigu is just helped that one step each time and given methods to understand for himself. Yeah. So, awareness, and even deeper than awareness, your sensitivity to the Atman is primary. Even before the child makes the first cry, it's there. We screw it up and then we educate people of whatever. That is the issue, and that's what Jinan is also pointing out again and again.
Yeah.
Do we understand how the tree grows? Or are we planting the tree like plantations to make tea? That's what I see in my house. Acres and acres of bloody stupid tea that spoils the soil, whatever. Monoculture is not the way of life.
Just give me one.
The entire paradigm of looking at resources, looking at human beings, all of this has been distorted because of one single idea. That idea is human beings have right over everything else.
Yeah, see, just give me 1 minute. I will have to leave in 2 minutes' time. So actually, see, what I've been now trying to do is to, encourage many parents to come together and do an absolutely fresh research. Because I think, if you have to recreate knowledge, then you understand knowledge through recreation.
Yes.
So this recreation is what is completely missing in modernity. So what I've been doing is I have a group of parents from all over who are consistently documenting minute aspects of what children are doing. So I assume that children are born perfect. The problem is the educated adults, parents and all that. And I always ask, are we worthy of their imitation? Then why are we standing around them?
Yes.
So I will leave. So that's why I just wanted to tell this. So I'm
perfect.
quite keen that if anybody is interested, do connect with me on research on children. Absolutely fresh research.
Perfect.
I have to leave. Sorry for this. So
thank you so much, Janani. Thank you so much for making time for this thing. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
I think in a way, if Shankar, we'll just come to you in a second. Kiran, to your question, right? And I know that is for Raghuji, but I'm going to take the opportunity to answer that. I think Jinan ji just now essentially answered that. How do you translate what all of we've been discussing to teaching? I think the primary context is, can the teacher recreate knowing? If a teacher is unable to recreate knowing, if they walk in having known, and it's not just with IKS, I would say this is true across the board, whether it's the existing mathematics curriculum, whether it's a science curriculum, anything. If a teacher walks into the room, into a conversation, having known, the knowing is lost. The beauty of knowing afresh with fresh eyes is lost. And that is the real of a teacher, not a BA degree. Right? And I think that's really what we are consistently losing in the education system. When a teacher is able to sit with the child, look at a phenomenon as if it has never happened, they're able to suspend their having known about it. Right? So I do know what photosynthesis is for this thing, but I don't need it now. Because when I'm seeing it happen, it's not happening because I know. It is happening because it will happen. Can a teacher bring that consistently to the learning interaction? I think that is what is something we have to visit. Because in the IKS space as well, there are multiple things that start coming into play. One is, for lack of a better word, the content aspect of things. Okay, so since you don't go ahead, Chandra. I think you should just go ahead and ask a question. We'll continue with this.
No. That's fine, Anji. I mean, I think my question to again Raghuji was, I mean, the whole discussion is about cognition, right? I mean, how do you cognize? Is it biological, mental, and all those things? But the point is, see, awareness even is prior to cognition. I mean, I know I am, or no, I am. It does not need any senses also. Biological, mental, none of those proofs are needed. Right? Even after you wake up, even though you don't have, your senses operating, you say, I had a good night's sleep, or, I didn't sleep well. Something tells you, right? The question is, I mean, should the focus be on cognitive processes or cognition, or even something that seemingly exists prior to that, which is awareness? I mean, that is my question. I mean, yes.
Simple. Again, Shankar, simple answer. Integration. And where am I located? If I'm located as it is being pushed by modernity into only the flat land, Visesha, differentiation, senses, and what is called cognition level, I will say I didn't sleep well, so maybe I should take a pill or do some Gucci like that. If I look at the same experience from a dharmic level, I will attend to it differently. And I will say, maybe I didn't eat properly last night. I will look at a whole set of causes and say all of this together made me not sleep properly. If I'm located at a dhyana level, I might discover that something triggered day before yesterday or yesterday which I didn't attend to, which came back in my dream, spoiled my dream, whatever it is. That is what we are talking about. So the deeper I anchor myself, the greater the integration, the less all the Guccis we are talking about.
The separation, Shankar, if I may add to what Raghuji is saying, the separation is artificial, right? These are simultaneously existing. They are fine for a cognitive understanding of the phenomena, but once understood, and this is where we come back to the phenomenal, you're living it simultaneously. And I think that is a very important thing to keep coming back, right? Like we say, like I keep telling teachers, right? Life was a whole before you entered school. It was siloed into things and it was left siloed. And that is why you hear people making statements like, well, I'm not a maths person or I'm not a history person and things like that. It's ridiculous, right? You can't say I'm not a left nostril breathing person or a right nostril. You don't say these things. We are a whole. It has been fragmented by the thought processes which we have come to accept as normal and natural. The reductionist approach has been accepted as being normal. Say that how else could you view an elephant? You have to take it into parts. But that's not true. Children view an elephant in its entirety. They don't need a piecemeal introduction to an elephant. So the awareness will exist. But about that, it's not like we have to first finish awareness before we can move to other things. These things are happening simultaneously. Because as I am aware, I also just prick my finger on a nail here. So I have that happening simultaneously with this. Yeah. So I hope that helped.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I got that, but I'll follow up with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to I think Karanji's question was this: from a teacher's point of view, this is something that's very essential, right? We cannot have a teacher, and this is where I think the complications of introducing or engaging with IKS in school settings and in a sort of an educational setup is, it's not content. It's not like you're adding a new entrepreneurship subject or a new psychology subject or something else, which is, I think, very nicely represented by Raghuji. It's not a bunch of colors, right? IKS is so intertwined into the rest of it and to the individual spirit and to the collective spirit that they spend and say that, I'll do away with this for whatever limitations or preferences of mine is not an option. So can the teacher first be able to do that and thereby bring that same sensitivity to all her interactions, her or his interaction with the child, is really where the challenge is. And that's what we're trying to, what else are the challenges of this teacher? Those are the things that we are exploring right now.
If I can just add one.
Yes, sir.
Is it okay? I don't know if there was another question.
Please.
Yeah. So this is something that we encounter all the time, right? This problem of trying to fit the ocean into a bottle. Right? How do you try and explain IKS in a fragmented structure?
Yeah.
Now, I think the way to frame it, at least what I found useful, is what are your fundamental human assets? Your attention, your will, your memory, and your ability to know what we call the ekagra chitta, which is what Raghuji is also alluding to. Now, the case for IKS is that it is invested in making the individual perfect, so that whatever object you pay attention to, your cognition and perception is crystallized so that you don't have any distortions in the way you perceive and cognize that. Therefore, it is anyways embodied, and it is, of course, sadhana oriented. Right? So an individual who has this faculty, a mastery over such faculties, when the antakarana is refined, whatever he or she looks at, it's not just knowledge, also the prayojana of that would be dharmic.
Yes.
That's the way I think we should at least think about this.
Yes. No, unquestionably. I think that's very important. If that one is very difficult to explain from a very transactional notion of education, which is, will this help in my board exams? When you are driven by an education system which has largely been looking at it from that question's point of view, this thing that Raghuji just shared feels superfluous. It feels like you're asking for too much. But it's not too much. Without this, the essence is lost. The ability to actually navigate this entirety, I think, is lost. So I'm just going to look at the next question that's up there.
One small thing, Anand, it might create a gadar, but it's a political issue.
Okay.
Why are we educating people?
I
Are
was
we
going to come to that.
educating people to become human beings? Or are we educating people to become part of the industrial system? That's what Jinan was saying. That's a very, very critical question.
Yes.
And if we don't also bring that into the picture, you're part of the industrialization process.
Yes.
Yeah, breakfast at 9, all this is all industrialization, no?
Yes. The breakfast being the most important meal of the day and all of those things. Yeah. No, true. All of those things that we have lost, right? And I agree. And I think for people to understand also, I think, and Shrikant, we'll just get to your question in a second, but this whole notion of how does colonization of cognition look? I think Raghuji used to give a good example. And I'd really like him to say it. The one where we talk about YOLO and FOMO.
No, go ahead.
No, so the thing, I think that was a brilliant example, and I've seen this in other things also. I could give other examples as well. But this Raghuji used to give this very good example, which is on this concept of YOLO, right? You live only once, or you only live once, however it expands to that FOMO, and all of those things seem very obvious. They seem very logical. They're like, yes, of course, you live only once. What else is there? But that doesn't hold true in a multi-cycle or a cyclic birth notion and philosophy that is there in IKS. Which is why, just because I knew, I will not immediately try to capitalize it all in this Janma has never been an attitude in the Indian system. See, in the IKS system, for instance, just to take a simple example, they knew how to make iron without it rusting. We did not set up 100 factories to get it done immediately. And the person or the persons who figured it out did not say we could capitalize it in this Janma because you know what, YOLO. They never did that, right? So that they had also the cognition and the ability. Again, this is where civilization thinking comes, say that just because I can, should I? This thought and these kind of questions all form part of this, the thinking of the IKS. But to add to this, for other people with a little more recent, if this YOLO and FOMO is not something that connects to you, think of all the apps that you might use, whatever your operating system might be. There are apps which have got infinite undo, apps that have got a single undo, and apps that don't have an undo option. Please watch your mind as it works with each of these apps. When you do not have an undo, the attention that you give to your work is very different from when you work with an app that has infinite undo. Right? And this is how the mind and cognition gets colonized. Because when I know I can go back as much as I want, I don't have to pay attention or pay care to whatever I'm doing right now. These are the kind of things we're trying to highlight and bring about and say that the technology is never neutral, first of all. We leave that point aside. There are other things also, and the influence are notions that we have wrapped in, neat wrappers like globalization, internationalization, and all of those things have very nicely and seductively changed our way of thinking about things. And to not be aware of that will prevent us, because with that thinking, when I approach an IKS concept, I'm likely to get into a binary mode of saying, oh, is it useful or should I dismiss it? Or is this secular or is this even something I should bother about? You're getting into these pointless binaries, which again didn't exist, right? So I think that is why it is very important to understand how our mind has and our cognition has gotten colonized. And it's not just the invaders and the imperial powers. As I keep saying, this is also the internationalization. It's also the globalization. It's also a notion of transaction and time, right? The way you have overnight delivery and all of that stuff has changed our way, right? So I think this is something very important to understand, not just for the teachers, right? It's for the educators, because that's when I realized why is studying this is important. And back to Raghuji's point, I think this is a common thing. Education is a political agenda always, not just in India. I think it's across the world. Schooling is a bunch of institutions to implement that. And learning is something that anyway happens, right? Whether there is schooling or whether there's education here in the country or in the ocean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You are always learning. Now, IKS, I think, recognized that and built systems around it. What will it take for us to get back? So let's just go to Srikanth right now. Could you explain your question? Yes, Vinayji, go for it. Go for it.
Just one more thing. So I think we can't have this conversation without, I think Raghuji already brought in the dharmic context, but without the dharmartha kama moksha framework.
The Purushartha, yeah.
Purushartha framework, in which it's already implicit that perception needs to be sharpened, to get to the final. And nature, our whole IKS journey really started with keen observation of nature and what is happening in nature, and asking what is our role in it, right? And what is the role I have to play? Because when I landed here, already a fantastic game is going on. Everything is so beautifully already designed. And to that, you can have two responses. One is, how do I capture this? How do I possess this? Or how do I understand what is my role to keep this going? And that's the question that we asked, which led to the IKS journey. That is the question they asked that led to their kind of journey.
Individual.
So if you look at the forest ecosystem, you cannot say that this tree is not useful or this little squirrel is not useful. So whatever nature needs for that ecosystem is there. Therefore, every child that is born, nature has created. Now we have to ask, how do we utilize education to help this child realize their full potential? And that is what this mode education is not asking, because it's already decided that this child needs to become this. So that is the difference.
Yeah. True. And there's actually a very nice, there's this very nice, it's a Shruti of sorts, which goes like, Amantram aksharam nasti, nasti moolam anaushadam, ayogya purusha nasti, yogya tastra durlabha, which basically is what you're saying. There is no sound. Like even the screeching of a chalk on a blackboard can become a mantra, right? And the same thing is, there's no substance that cannot be converted into an aushadha. And similarly, there's no Purusha also who's useless. There's no child who's useless. What is really missing is the alchemist, the one who knows how to convert one into the other, and so on and so forth. So very rightly said. I mean, forest is definitely an example, but individual body is also that. To go around saying that this cell is actually not useful, let me throw it out, is just, it doesn't make any sense. We just don't seem to understand how it is and why does this nail grow helps and all of that stuff.
They've just discovered that there's nothing called vestigial. They've just discovered that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Srikanth, go for it.
Yeah. So when the NCF 2005 came out, Rohit Dhankar sir, he was a kind of a very important anchor figure behind that. He wrote a paper on how a certain process, right? Aims, and then from aims will come the curriculum. Curriculum is like a plan from where certain some kind of a syllabus will come, content gets organized, subjects get formed. So that became an anchor paper for what was there 20 years back in NCF National Curricular Framework 2005. Now, when we come to the National Education Policy, I was actually part of some of the deliberations and reading the comments of people and all that as a part of that. And that is where the Indian knowledge system has come into this. Now, when we think about Indian knowledge system, Is there a different framework? I'm okay with that. I mean, like, what would that framework be? Because there is a traditional established methodology for this right now, which is aims and then curriculum and then syllabus and then organization of content. So in this body of knowledge, which if and when it comes and in what form it comes into education, how do we think about that? In terms of it can be different. I mean, it doesn't need to be like that. What I said just now, it can be something else. Is there anything, some thoughts on that? Yeah.
So I'm happy to share my thoughts, and I think everyone would have a couple of things to say about this. Firstly, Shrikant, two things. One, to address your point about having aims and curricular things and all of that stuff with the learning outcomes at the end, is a framework that has existed in a variety of policies across the world. Right? It has not been realized properly because people typically have just picked up a textbook and started going through it chapter after chapter. Right? This whole construction of curriculum, etc., does it. So in a way, it's good that the Western system itself has been very poorly implemented here. So that's one sort of silver lining. If I think that. But back to the IKS and what form it would take. The thoughts that I have is primarily, I don't think IKS would be a subject siloed study. It can't be, because in the Indian knowledge system, we have studied systems. We have not studied subjects. And I think that's a very important thing to understand, right? And in that, it's not just the commercially viable or exploitable systems that we should be looking at. It is also relationships. And, primarily should be what is happening within me, understanding that. So they're the without and the within. Right? And like in the invocation, we talk about Purnamada, Purnamida, that entirety has to be understood before. So that is how I think it would shape. Now, in that, what you have at the tail end in the current system is a learning outcome. I don't think that is what would be the language we'll be using for this, because these are transformations, right? So we can only talk about whether the seed has been sown for the transformation. And there are certain lakshanas that will be there for things going on the right path. And the jnanis, we don't need an assessment system as much as we need the jnanis to be able to tell whether the person is on the right track. There are also, you can still have exams. I can still have a Vyakarana exam and all of that stuff. That's not a problem. But there are a lot of other things that we should start looking at. Because if you look at a lot of our systems, we have had lakshanas defined. Those lakshanas did not come with an exam paper, right? The lakshanas were admitted. Like when we say that Sri Ramachandra had so many lakshanas, nobody said, okay, who had the checklist served to him and which government office will I get the checklist from? That was never a thought process. We just know what a lakshana is. Similarly, I think these forms of assessments will start coming to practice and will be in vogue once the IKS system is understood and used at the right time. That's my take. Raghuji.
Very quickly, I think, since it's a specific question on framework, the Adhikara, Vishaya, Sambandha and Prayojana, I find it to be holistic. Because one, there is a personal responsibility. Adhikara is seen as authority and right, but it's actually responsibility and duty in the sense, right? What is the refinement within you? Then there is the Vishaya, what you spoke about, the content, the curriculum, the subject matter. Then the Sambandha, the relational aspect. How are these things tied up, which is the dharma layer that, in Raghuji's model. And then the Prayojana, which is once again the dharmic, imposition of making sure it's sustainable. Prayojana cannot be one-sided or one-dimensional. All of your deferred outcomes are also factored in. All of your negative externalities are internalized. In the current economic, in all other systems, I can produce something which has negative externalities, but they don't come back to my accounting system. I can do 2% CSR and be done with it because I'm fulfilling my legal obligations. But in a dharmic system, the prayojana would be, if my act is producing anything that is negative as an externality, that has to be internalized. My accounting has to bake that in. Once you see this, there cannot be a sustainable world without this, without each unit in the society factoring and internalizing the negative externalities it is producing. Right? Which is why, if you look at the whole ocean of churn, when you do that, you get the Visha, you also get the Amrita. So you have to go through these things. And that is what is happening within us as well. Right? We have to integrate all of these things. So that becomes, I think, a model for us to think about, which is far more holistic than just aims and learning, because the aim here is sustainability.
No, very beautifully said, Raghava. I was just going to add a simple thing, Anand, that there are tests. The test is the doing. That's very important to understand. That
yes.
when my teacher says, yes, you have the adhikara now to go and teach somebody else yoga, he's observing me and asking me certain questions. He's seeing how I'm teaching people. The assessment is not one exam. The assessment is every meeting I have with him. There is something happening out there. And then he suddenly pops up a question. Okay, would you like to teach? Right. And every student he sends to me is another test.
Exactly.
Not chumma sending somebody, next person, ajao, no.
Yes.
So there's some thing that is being observed, and then some next step is being offered to you. So there are tests, but not this one kind of test. And the interesting thing is, I had a brilliant physics teacher in college who said any exam is disturbing the system, and he gave a beautiful physics theory for why the system is being disturbed. Raghava will write, like he's a systems guy. So he gave this whole thing saying it's an external imposition on an internal unfolding system. So it is something that is not the right thing to do.
No, with you. Vinayji, would you like to add something to that?
So there were always tests, but not in the sense that we talk about now. I mean, and they were not confined to a particular stage or confined to a particular time. They're spread out over time and space. And even before the student was accepted, the testing of whether he's a Supatra, that was also before. And it's not just about, it's the question of what are you testing? If it is a warrior, archer like Arjuna, you're testing that particular thing. But also it could be mainly whether you have acquired a dharmic drishti or not. And a teacher can assess that.
Yes.
Right? By putting you in different, like you were saying, putting you in different situations and looking at, it's not, again, it's not the modern obsession with the answer, but, the drishti and the questions that you ask. In fact, the questions that the student asked itself was actually the test. What kind of questions you're asking.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Itself told the teacher what level where you are. And then he would answer you at that level. And when the nature of the question changed, he would know that you have kind of evolved to a higher level and therefore ready to receive the answer as well.
Yes. And I think another element of this system, and I know Shrikant's question was not so much around testing in exams. It was around the framework. But even in the testing, there's another very interesting aspect, and please correct me if my understanding is misplaced. The word, or rather the credibility of the teacher, was more important than the exam. So if Raghuji basically said that no, Anand is there or he's got it, nobody questioned. Nobody has said no, we still need an objective evaluative system. So today we don't have that. There is no teacher credibility that is associated with the students' lakshanas. We don't ever say that, "Arey, so-and-so is a student of Vinayji." Of course, why are we even doubting the student? We don't say that anymore. That is lost also, if you look at it from that point. Today, it is all we need to have very objective exams and, mark scoring schemes, etc. So there are a lot of these things that will change, Shrikant. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes, Raghav, you wanted to say something.
No. Just a quick example of Prayojana, and since you spoke about mathematics and how we look at the dharmic drishti, I remembered a single line from Sriman Adinarayan of Anadi Foundation. He said the purpose of mathematics is to know how many desires your prarabdha can incorporate. If you look at that statement, it's such a there is so much to unpack in that, right?
Right.
What is the purpose of doing this? Is to make sure that you are content and you live a happy life, for which managing your desire is essential. And all of global culture today, all of modern education that produces culture, only inflates the desires without giving you the downstream ability to harmonize those things. Right?
Yes.
So while this appears, a lot of this appears esoteric or even perhaps impractical and like a lament, we will have to start the examination from what are the outcomes that current systems are producing, without fear or favor. Right? If they are already producing harmonious outcomes, then we don't need to worry about it. We might as well follow. The fact is that you're at a precipice. You're only 4 months into this new year. You've started 4 world wars, right? or 4 wars which are tuned into another world. So what is it about human condition that is not leading to contentment even as the material expansion is happening?
Yes. And thank you for bringing that up, Ragaji. I think these discussions they're very important, not because we like to just navel gaze and get into these kind of esoteric conversations. I think the intent is to unpack them and bring them into implementable frameworks that schools and any institute of learning and education can adopt without having to sit and reinvent things. So I think while some of these would seem esoteric, we will definitely come out with results that will inform frameworks that make things a lot more consumable. Yes, Raghuji, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to address Shrikantji's question, which needs a lot more dialogue and depth. Yeah, but 2 things. One is what I have tried to propose to people, not that they've accepted it so easily, is you teach teachers about those steps that I was telling you about, this para-vidya, all these levels and all that. People think, first of all, avidya means ignorance. There's a big problem there itself. So these levels of utility, then greater dharmic utility, so on and so forth, are all built into our educational system. Now, what I have tried to suggest is teach the teachers this and then hold workshops with teachers saying, okay, how will you teach your current science using this understanding?
Exactly.
Especially in lower classes.
Yeah.
See, if you can instill some of this approach to knowing in a young mind through a good teacher, that will carry through. See,
Absolutely.
so that to me is the critical thing, because when I go back, I had phenomenal teachers, who taught in a certain way, and one of them was Anand Lakshmi, who is very well known in the education system. I was one of her early guinea pigs. And they were fantastic. We would learn geography by sculpting the whole of the Indian subcontinent. I can never forget it.
Yeah.
Right. And then questions arise, and why does this fold come? All kinds of things happen, no? But it's the teacher who instilled this and used a completely different method by which the same content was imparted. I think we have to trust that there are enough interested teachers. Many of them are capable of being creative.
Yes.
And help them, give them space to be creative. They will work around this stuff.
Absolutely. I think either Namrata or Srihari, I think, are raising 2 questions. One is, of course, I think what Vinayji also said. It's not just it's also the kind of questions that the student would ask. But the other thing that they're raising is, how do we take the first step in this system? So I'm going to give my 20 seconds worth of response, and then I'd love to hear the 3 of you. So my thing is, I think this is sort of there is an approach in Advaita also, right? The neti kind of a thing. I think we need to first remove off all the clutter of what isn't part of a, say, IKS learning space. before we can embark on saying, okay, now that we know that it is not all of this, we realize what it is, and the first step emerges organic. Not evading your question. I think this is how I'm seeing it in my head. But I would love to hear from Raghuji, Vinayji, and Raghuji also.
See, Anand, for me, the key thing is, do I love the system, and do I love some of the fundamental axiomatic, or whatever the right word is, principles of the system? Yeah,
Yes.
the first axiomatic principle is ahimsa is the governing principle of everything. Right? And
Okay.
a modern person cannot love this because he's taught how to extract.
Right from beginning, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
There's another very beautiful part of our entire thing. All of us have been talking about it in different ways. What is the Purushartha? Right? Second is, can you let me unfold as a human being? As a child, I am curious. I haven't met a single child who's not curious. You kill the bloody curiosity first, and then do all kinds of nonsensical things afterwards. Yeah, I got through college with 20% attendance in class. If I had attended more, I wouldn't have got through. Yeah, I was very curious. We had lots of colleagues who would teach me and all of that. I did all the stuff I wanted to and still did well in college, yeah.
Right.
I'm sure I'd have died if I had to stay 8 hours and listen to bloody lectures in the college. I never missed a tutorial because they were great fun. You were given a problem to solve. There were some 2-3 people to solve it with you. Right. It is very simple. Yeah. You have to just trust that this is there, and you have to love this whole system, because the Indian system simply says, enable the other to grow. Don't bloody sit there and say, this is how I'm going to harvest you.
Yes, Raghuji. Either of you, Vinayji, Raghuji, either of you.
Yeah, so I think to add on to what Raghuji was saying, I think modern education has become a process of inducting geniuses into classes and converting them into idiots, and and we've seen many examples of that. I think it's a deep question and requires more deliberation. But I would say start with awakening the dormant genius inside the kids that's been suppressed. And I've done some experiments and I can share about that. So I think helping children discover their Swadharma, I think, is a very good starting point. And one of the exercises I do is a segment called just questions. I mean, no answers, just questions. And I ask the child to ask a question that is very important to him or her, but it's not been answered by parents, teachers, anyone. But nobody would think it's very important. They may think it's silly, but it's very important for the child. And it's bothering the child. It doesn't let the child sleep. What is that question? So in the beginning, they always ask some silly question like, is the sun yellow or orange? And, but when you prod them, say, okay, how does it matter to you if it's yellow or orange? Something that's really important to you. Then they start asking amazing questions where even a 10-year-old child asked, have we as humans stopped evolving, or can we evolve further? And I said, that's what you're talking, Aurobindo. And my 5-year-old niece asked, why do we sleep? And I said, that's a Stanford PhD question right there. So there is these things already in them, and they have been told to just shut up and, study what's been told to you. But once they realize that they're free to ask, and that there is and they're not stupid, they start asking amazing questions, and that can be the beginning of their journey. Thank you.
I think I'll make it more functional. One is articulate in convincing manners what are the limitations of the current system. It's a very important thing to do, because learning is near to far. To be able to see the limitations of the current system would open up imagination, would open up receptivity. And I think I like the approach of design thinking and abductive reasoning. we should ask not what is the generic to specific or specific to generic, not just that. We should also ask, how can we do this? So it actually unshackles your imagination, which is what you do in design, right? How might we bring IKS into the system? Or how might we bring IKS, which also gives him the creative agency to engage with it, right? And second is what Namrata and Sherry are doing so fantastically to create actual content, interventions, show enterprise. This is not going to happen without people being convinced about it. And the people who have asked this question are the best exemplars that I know who are actually doing it. Develop that 20-hour curriculum, learn, practice, go, teach, learn from that. And then success and the feedback that you get is what creates the momentum, right? So that's what we need to do. Create more cases and examples where people get benefited. And once the prayojana is registered, people will, it's all mimetic desire. We need to create that desire that they want to mimic. Right now, that power of that mimetic desire is with the liberal forms. Liberal, not in a sense, in a verbal sense of the word, but in the ideological sense, right? In the one life sense. But we have to create the receptivity and we have to create the mimetic desire for a more content life, which is what the use case is for IKS.
Thank you. I think with this, we'll halt today's session. This has been fantastic. And I think this is, as I said, this is one aspect of all the things that we need to consider, which is the colonization of cognition that we've looked at. We'll be sharing this recording up on a service that anyone can access. And the dialogue will continue. I think we still need to get a lot of things ironed out. While we do understand that there are these various things that each one of us has shared, I think stringing it together into a cogent and coherent set of steps for the educator to be able to adopt, I think is a very vital part of this conversation. Once again, thank you, Vinayji, Raghuji, and Raghuji for joining us. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, and thanks so much to all the folks who joined in to share their thoughts. This has been amazing. Really, it's just been
thank you, Anand, and thank you, sister, because what would have been an unresponded to provocation by Jinanji, and he is a chief agent provocateur.
Exactly.
If it didn't find the fertile and very patient soil of Anand's heart and mind, we wouldn't have had this development. So thank you for that response, because I learned a lot from the way you engaged with it.